So in today's video, I wanted to talk about some of the headphones that I use regularly as a reference point. A lot of you guys have asked me, what are your regular daily headphones that you anchor everything, all of your sort of evaluations to? And just to kind of like address that a little bit, every headphone is different. So every headphone that comes in for review is going to have different comparisons and reference points. It really makes sense to look at this through the lens of both the type of headphone that you're covering. So if it's a planar magnetic, for example, you want to be comparing it against other planar magnetics, but also other headphones around its price point and in its same category. Like, for example, open back or closed back, wireless, IEM, you get the idea. But there are also a set of headphones and just audio equipment in general that I will use on a regular basis to anchor my recognition of what I find to be good. Now, this is obviously for me, not everybody's going to have the same one, that old caveat. But with that out of the way, here are the headphones and the audio equipment that I use regularly as a reference point and the reasons why I use them. Now, I want to begin this by just mentioning a couple things. One is that all of these headphones I use with the consideration of EQ. I don't always EQ everything to, perfectly match whatever target or anything like that. I just always use these with a little bit of adjustment to match my preferences. The second thing I want to mention is that I don't actually own any of these headphones except for one of them. So yes, being a headphone reviewer, I always have stuff coming in that I need to evaluate and spend time with, and I rarely get to spend time with things that I actually own. So unlike what you might see with a lot of other folks out there who have just like tons of headphones that they own, I only own one. And the rest of the equipment that I use here on a regular basis is provided by headphones.com. And speaking of headphones.com, if you're looking for a list of headphones that I recommend, a tier list of sorts, a ranking list, you can check that out in the description. It's sort of my picks, my favorite headphones. And you'll notice that the headphones that I've chosen for this video are not necessarily just the ones that are at the top of that list. So let's get into that right now. Let's talk about it. Now, the first headphone that I use as a reference point is a closed-back headphone, and it is a cheap one. It is the AKG K371. Essentially a great budget closed-back headphone that is well-tuned, that is competent, that's going to be useful for people who are looking for normal and good. It's not, the best thing in the world. It has its issues in the treble. It has its issues with build quality, but for its price point, it is extremely good value and I highly recommend it. And I regularly use that one as a reference point for closed-back headphones. The next headphone that I use on a regular basis is the Sennheiser HD600. Which is a surprise to absolutely nobody. This is a headphone that I compare other headphones with when I'm evaluating things like timbre, the naturalness, and the HD600, again for the mids and for the treble, is still one of the best headphones out there. I did a video on this, and yes, this is also one that I do EQ. I boost up the bass because it does roll off in the sub bass. That's its limitation. So that's the gist on this headphone. But for specifically timbre and naturalness, and if I'm assessing other headphones in comparison to this for the experience of that, this headphone has to be in that conversation. Now, the next headphone that I use that I would consider to be somewhat of a step up from this is kind of a weird one, and I don't actually expect this to be something that people, go out and buy because it really doesn't exist anymore in the form that I use it. But it is the Focal Alere with the Utopia pads. The closest thing to that would be either the Alex or the Clear. That is a headphone that I think is important to use as a reference point because it is a good indication of this quality of the experience that many of us refer to when we're talking about dynamics or that sense of impact or physicality. Those headphones do that very well, and it's important to, if you're assessing that quality in other headphones, you can listen to it in one of those and go, okay, how close to that does it get for the experience? Again, these are just descriptions of the experience, but I think you get the idea. It's important to have that reference point as well. Now, the next one that I use is also one that you probably are going to have a hard time finding. It is the HiFiMan HE6, the original. Now, you can find the HE6 SEV2, and I do recommend that one. That one is a great value headphone, but I use the original here, and I use it with the Sundara pads, and they do change the sound signature compared to the default pads that are on it for the better. Like, the sound signature here is a lot better. And the reason why I use this headphone is it is, in my view, a very good representation of a planar magnetic headphone, an open back planar magnetic headphone. This does basically all of those things that you want planars to do well, plus it's also a planar that does have a great sense of physicality to it as well. So it indicates that, driver type, you can do anything with any driver, essentially. And this does basically all of those things that I love in headphones extremely well, except for, again, maybe that timbre thing that the Sennheisers do a little bit better at, the HD600 in particular. But the HE6 here is a fantastic planar magnetic headphone. It's got a generally balanced sound signature with a bit of a dip there in the mids and then also a bit of a peak at around 9K. And those are really the only two things that I EQ on this headphone, and it sounds awesome when you do that. The HE6 SE-V2, same thing. If you want a slightly different version of this one, I prefer the HE6, the original here, but if you're looking for the closest thing to this, it would be the HE6 SE-V2. They're very similar. Now, that's basically all that I use for wired passive over-ear headphones for this type of thing. Again, every headphone has its own comparisons that need to be made, but that's in addition to these reference points that I use when I'm not reviewing, for example. And you might be wondering, well, why isn't there an Odyssey headphone on this list? And there would be. The MM500 would be on this list. That I would use it, but it is too clampy for me. So unfortunately, that one I can't put it on there. And that's something that I think is often a little bit underrepresented, is comfort and usability, wearability over long periods of time. If I'm spending a lot of time working on an edit, working on a video, working on an article, I want to be able to wear headphones that are comfortable for the duration of that work. And that's also, a reason why I don't use the Sundara on a regular basis, the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. It has a great tuning, but it doesn't have cup swivel, and I find I prefer headphones that are a little bit less clampy. Again, big head problems. You guys know that. Now, as I mentioned, I don't actually own any of those headphones. The one headphone that I do own, that I also use as a reference point from time to time, is the Focal Batiste. And this is, if I'm doing any sort of comparison with wireless or ANC headphones, the Focal Batiste, for me at least, is one of the better sounding ones out there. There are other ones that you could also consider in this bracket, like there's the Mark Levinson one that's up there as well. There's the Final Audio UX3000. But I find the Batiste is kind of the best balance of comfort and sound. Again, I think both of those things are a key requirement, and for that reason, the Batiste is the headphone that I own. And actually, it is a headphone that I use all the time when I have my air conditioner on, because the air conditioner, it's kind of loud, and the noise canceling here does a great job of basically cutting all of that off. I also do use this with EQ. I have a bunch of EQ settings. I will leave that in the link in the description as well if you guys are interested in that, but that's with the wired DAC mode. So I use this as a wired with USB headphone. And this is true for when I'm sitting here at my desk in my apartment, and also if I'm on the road somewhere and I'm editing from my laptop. It just kills all the rest of the noise around me and allows me to focus on my work. Now, what about in-ear headphones? Probably the most common one that I use is the TheAudio Oracle Mark 1. And it's not to say that it's perfect or anything like that, but that is one that I find is generally pretty close to what I'd consider normal and good. And what I like about the Oracle Mark 1 is that it has a generally normal shape for the upper mids and treble, and we call this, the strongest part of the ear gain. At the same time, it is not too forward in that region. I find that for myself and what I prefer, I like it a little bit more relaxed in that region. And it does that without compromising on the shape of the HRTF, essentially. And this is actually a theme with me for IEMs that I've noticed. There are other IEMs that I could use as a reference point, like the Moondrop Blessing 2 and Blessing 3, that I think are really good, but I find I prefer, again, a little bit more of a relaxed presentation there, and the TheAudio Oracle Mark 1 does a great job of that. Another one that I use on a regular basis now, actually probably will start using it more, is the Symphonium Meteor right here. And so it's a bit more like U-shaped, I would describe, compared to the TheAudio Oracle Mark 1. And I know there's folks probably wondering like, well, why not Etymotic, right? That's supposed to be a reference IEM. And sure, but I really struggle with the fit and the comfort of those for my ear canal. And so I don't use the Etymotics. But as I said, for me, for regular daily use, even though they're not necessarily my favorite IEMs of all time, I use the TheAudio Oracle Mark 1 and the Symphonium Meteor. They're good reference points to be able to sort of anchor my sense of, how things perform. Oh, and when it comes to true wireless IEMs, I use the Apple AirPods Pro 2, even though I use no other Apple devices. I am not an Apple fan. I actually prefer not Apple. I prefer Windows and Android. But I use the AirPods Pro 2 because they sound good, and that's basically it. And lastly, I want to talk about some of the equipment that I use on a regular basis, so the amp, the DAC, all that kind of stuff. For most of my evaluations and most of the measurements that I've done, it has been the Matrix X Saber Pro for the DAC and the Vioelectric HPA V550 Mark II, I believe. And there's a very good reason for that. I find that amplifier to be incredibly versatile. And when you're constantly reviewing headphones, you have a ton of different equipment coming in that has different power requirements. It's really important to have an amplifier or source equipment that is versatile, that allows you to, get good data from all of that different equipment. The other reason is I want really low output impedance because I don't want to be affecting the frequency response of the equipment that I am evaluating, at least not until I dive into it with EQ. Now, that's not to say that you can't get that with other much more modestly priced devices. I recommend those more modestly priced devices, but specifically when it comes to headphone measurements, you really want low output impedance because not everything that you get through is going to have a linear impedance curve, and if you don't have low output impedance, that can affect the result, and you don't want that. Now, with that said, I am actually looking to change that source equipment up a little bit, and not for really any other reason than I want to try something with a slightly different form factor. That stack ends up being quite large, and so I'm looking for things that maybe make my life a little bit easier when using them. So for that reason, I'm actually considering a Ferrum stack. Golden Sound just recently did a review on one of the Ferrum DACs, which I thought was very interesting. And actually, we have a bunch of reviews on some of the Ferrum equipment on this channel, and I've been watching some of that as well from Golden Sound. He does all the DAC and amp stuff, which I do not do. And the other one is there's some stuff from Chord that I'm interested in for the sole reason that it has glowy lights and marbles on it, and I think it looks cool, and I think it'll look cool in a video if I can get one in, put it in the background, and then, you know, I'll be a real YouTuber. I'll be a real boy. But yeah, glowy lights are cool and I want to use them. So there. Of course, I like the form factor of those ones as well. And for me, that's what my life is all about these days. It's about ease of use, form factor, versatility, those types of things. There are all kinds of reasons to get other equipment that is far more targeted and intentional and pointed towards a particular thing. And I mean that in terms of headphones as well. Like, maybe the versatility question is less important to you than it is to me, but that's why this equipment is sort of my reference gear. And I just want to make a quick little note about what it means for something to be reference gear. I do not mean like reference in terms of like perfectly neutral statements of neutral across the board, even though many of these happen to be fairly close because they do all sound different from one another in one respect or another. They're all generally balanced and have somewhat of a recognizable shape for the ear gain that is somewhat HRTF-y, which if that makes sense, right? There's nothing really wacky going on with any of these, but they don't all sound the same. And maybe that's just an interesting takeaway, that there can be different things that are referencey. Anyways, that is it for today, but I would like to know, for any of you guys, if you have multiple headphones, many people do, why are you getting those? Are you getting them for similar reasons? What do you use as sort of like your anchor for normal? Do you consider that? Are you looking for something that is specifically different from what you already have? And let me know what you consider your reference points. Leave that in the comments. And as usual, if you're interested in any of our written material, that is up on headphones.com in the audio files section there. That's where we post all of our reviews. Our Discord is linked in the description, and you can also check out our forum. That's where all the measurements are posted on a regular basis if you want to see more of that stuff. At the moment, I have nothing else to say on this topic, so I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.